Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Right, so we are looking at graphical models. We looked at both directed and undirected models, right? And I said the thing of interest to us. So there are two things that are of interest. The first thing is given a model, right? How do you do inference using the model? Right. So what is the inference question? Inference question is trying to answer queries on marginals, right? So I give you a very complex joint probability distribution. I want to know what is the probability that there is an earthquake. Yeah, that's not a very complex system, but anyway. So what is the probability that there is an earthquake, right? I can also ask for conditional marginals. Given that John called, what is the probability there is an earthquake? So these are things we looked at, right? So it turns out that this itself is a hard problem, and for large graphs you will have to come up with ways of approximating even this, right? So I will kind of motivate why there is a hard problem in a minute. And the second problem that we are interested in is, what is the first problem?
Given the
Huh?
model, finding the marginals.
Sorry?
Given the model,
Exactly. So what could be the second problem?
given the marginals, finding
No. Find the model. I mean, how do you derive the model, right? But you are close, right? So how do you find the model, right? From the raw data, right? I will give you training data. I will give you a lot of data. How do you find the model, right? So the Bayesian network structure learning itself is a hard thing. Right? So the simple problem is, so even in the structure learning, they split it into two things, right? So I should probably put this down. The first problem is inference. Right. So here there are two components to it. So given the graph, right? So I will give you the graph, find the parameters. Right. In the directed case, that would be finding the conditional probability distributions. Once I give you the graph, I know exactly what are the conditional probability distributions I need. I can just go to the data, count and find it out, right? And in the indirect case, what it would be? Find the potentials. So given the graph, find the potentials, right? As soon as I give you the graph, you know what are the potentials that you need to estimate, right? So you will have all these edge potentials, you will have node potentials, and you have clique potentials. So you will know what are the potentials that you are estimating, right? So and you just go and estimate the potentials, right? So this is essentially the learning problem. Given right. The second problem would be find the graph, right? So what are the things you should look at finding in trying to find a graph? Essentially, you would need to find that graph structure, right, that supports the conditional independence that is present in the data, whether it is directed graphs or undirected graphs, whatever graph structure you are learning. So you have to infer what are the conditional independence that is present in the data, and you have to find a graph that will support that, right? Right. So essentially you will have to, there are many ways of doing it. People start off with a completely connected graph and then they start knocking off edges, right? And then you can do some kind of cost complexity pruning like you do in decision trees, right? So you could have a much more complex graph, right? Then you can try to prune things down so that you can do a trade off between the number of edges you have. So there are a variety of algorithms that people have proposed for graph structure learning. So this part is easy, right? Given graph, find parameters is easy. How will you do that? Well, it's just like conditional probability distribution estimates, right? So you can very easily do that for directed graphs. It's just counting. You look at the data, see how many times Mary called when there was an earthquake, right? Or when the alarm rang, how many times Mary called, and then you can essentially fill in this conditional probability tables, right? So those things you can do straightforward. But learning the graph structure is a little bit involved. I am not going to get into that because it's a lot of lot of structure that we have to build in before you can. So I am going to now go back to inference. So inference is the interesting part, right? So let me start off with an example, right. So I am taking this example from right. So for a long time we did not have a really good book on graphical models, and then Kohler and Friedman wrote this over complete book on graphical models. I mean, it is like it has everything that you would need to know about graphical models and more, right. So it is like this huge tome, right, but it is a fantastic book. It really is a good place to start, right. So why I am saying it is a good place to start is this is still a very active area of research, right, probabilistic graphical models, and every year newer techniques, newer breakthroughs keep coming up. So it is like it is not like you can write a book and say, okay, everything you need about graphical models is captured in the book, right. So because it's still evolving field, right. I am going to draw a really large graph here. Okay. Here is a small thing which Daphne Kohler came up with to capture some fraction of her interaction with students, right. So depending on the difficulty level and the intelligence of the student, okay, the student will get some grade in her course, right, and the difficulty level of the course depends on how coherent the teacher is, right. So the coherence influences the difficulty level, okay, and then the difficulty level and intelligence influence the grade, right. And so depending on whether the student got a good grade or not in the course, the teacher might give him or her a letter, right, letter of recommendation. If the grade is bad, then the probability of getting a letter is very small. If the grade is good, the probability of getting a letter is very high, right. Even there that happens, and whether they get a letter of recommendation from the teacher or not, right, it influences whether you get a job, and whether you get a job and whatever grade you did influences whether you are happy or not, right. This is like, right, so sometimes you might be very happy for having done very well in the course even though you do not find a job, right. So maybe that is also possible, right. I am just giving you the structure here because this is sufficient for us to talk about some of the difficulties in the inference process, right. When you are actually solving problems in this, you would need the probabilities, but we are not going there, right. So this is just to give you the structure. Suppose I am interested in answering a okay, let me write this out now. Okay. Probability C D I G S L, okay. So that is can people see what I have written? If you can't, you can write it from the graph directly. So you do not really need me to write this out, right. So right. So, this is the probability of coherence times the probability of difficulty given coherence times the probability of intelligence times the probability of grade given intelligence and difficulty, so on and so forth. I just written out the joint distribution, right. You can just look at the graph and you can write out that yourself easily, right. Now, I am going to ask the question. I need more space, so I am going to do this here. What is the probability that a student in this universe will get a job? In this universe, I mean the universe captured by that, right. So, what is the probability that person will get a job, right. So, what will you, how will you go about doing this? Essentially this will be that guy. Right. So, if you think about it, this is essentially order of 2 power 7 computation if everything is Boolean, right. So, it looks odd, right. I mean, so I mean running this over the entire table, running this summation over the entire table is not correct. So, the whole idea of us doing inference was, I mean doing this factorization was to make this computation simpler, right. So, if I did not have the factorization, right, I essentially would have had to do this computation. So, yeah, so this is 7 sums that are running over this very large table, correct. So, now what we are going to try and do is try to make the summation simpler by pushing in some of the sums, right, pushing it in to the maximum extent possible, so that what I sum over, okay, is as small a table as possible, right. Right now all my 7 sums are running over the entire joint distribution, right. I want to rearrange this in such a fashion that each sum runs over as small a setup as possible, right. So, how will I do that? Just for the same question here. Should I do this that way or? I'm missing something here. So, what do I need there? I'll just come to that in a minute. Continuing that. Yeah, okay. So, I moved from the conditional distribution to the potential formulation, right, but you know what this means. This is essentially the conditional distribution here. So we can actually think of that having been represented as an undirected graph also. We can use the same technique that I am doing here even with undirected graphs, right. So that is the point, to make that point I just switched over from this notation to this notation. So in this particular case these factors happen to be conditional distributions, but they could be factors that you get from here. So in which case you probably have to have some kind of normalization going here, right. So if you are going to use this as an undirected model, then you will have to have some normalization to take care of the thing. So is it correct? So what I have written is correct, right. So the notation I am doing here is essentially this, right, takes in j, l, s as arguments, okay, and returns a distribution over j, okay, that is what the j here stands for. So it takes j, l, s as arguments and returns a distribution over j, right, or some function over j. This takes l and g as arguments, okay, and returns something over l. So that is what this is, right. So this is essentially probability of j given l comma s, so something like that, the equivalent to that in my potential notation. So that is the thing I am marking here, okay. Is it clear? So now we can think about it, right? So the C runs over only those two tables, right? They are small tables. So C has just two entries in it, right? Right, psi C will have only two entries in it, right, whether the teacher is coherent or the teacher is not coherent, right, and psi D comma C will have how many entries in it? 4 entries in it, right. How many independent entries in it? Huh? 2, okay, it will have only 2 independent entries, not 3, right, because given the course is not given the teacher is not coherent, what is the probability it is difficult. So automatically 1 minus that gives me the probability it is not difficult, right. Given the teacher is not coherent, what is the probability it is difficult, and 1 minus that gives me the probability that it is not difficult, right. So I only have 2 parameters. So you can see that I am reducing the parameters tremendously. So here what would I have had? I would have had 2 power 8 minus 1 parameters, right, a full joint distribution, right. If I specify 2 power 8 minus 1 parameters, and 1 minus the sum of that will give me the last one, but here look, I have tremendously cut down. So this has 1 parameter, this has only 2 parameters, right. So likewise this is going to have four parameters, right. For every combination of ID you are going to have one possible outcome for G, the other one is 1 minus that, right. So for every combination of ID you need to have 1 parameter, so you will have 4 parameters. So likewise here you will have 1 parameter again, here you will have 2 parameters, so like that. So you have reduced, and if you take the product is much smaller than the 2 power 8 minus 1 that we had, right. So that is the power of doing the factorization. So the number of parameters you need for specifying the joint distribution comes down significantly, and you can do this as well, right. You can start pushing the sums in, so that this sum runs over only a small number of elements, right. Likewise this sum runs over a small number of elements, and so on and so forth, and then I can complete the entire joint distribution, right. So this kind of an approach, right, where you push the sums in is known as variable elimination, right. So for small graphical models, okay, this is a good way to do inference, right. It is not an approximate way of doing inference, it is an exact way of doing inference, right. It gives you the same result as you would have gotten if you had summed over the entire distribution, okay. So it is called variable elimination, and so the advantage is, like I said, the amount of computation that you are doing you will be minimizing, right. So how much computation would you be doing? What will be the maximum, what will be the largest table that you are summing over? Huh?
Possible that, I mean, you end up summing over all the variables anyway.
Exactly. So it depends on how much you are able to compress the things, and how much you are actually able to eliminate the variables. So the more variables you are able to eliminate, the faster will be your computation, right. So think about what you are doing here. The first step is marginalizing over C, right? So I am going to say that you marginalize over C, right, and end up with a, you marginalize over C and you end up with a factor over D, right. So I am going to call it some tau 1 D, right. So what will tau 1 D look like? Yeah, that is tau 1 D, right. Next what do I do? What am I marginalizing over? Marginalizing over D, right. So this guy, right, this whole thing I am marginalizing over, right. I am going to call that factor tau 2, and what will it be a function of? G and I, and that will be equal to right. So I keep doing this, right. Next I am eliminating I, so what will I end up with a factor over? Huh? G and S, right. Yeah. Then what will I end up with? I love this guy as it is, right. I am eliminating H, right. So there is no H here. So tau 3 GS will continue propagating beyond this point, right, but I will also introduce a new factor called tau 4, which will have right. So you can see that, right, at this point I just trying to for you to get an appreciation of what the computation is happening, right. At this point you will have tau 3, you will also have tau 4, right. So when you compute it till tau 3 you have eliminated tau 1, you eliminated tau 2, because you have rolled up everything into tau 3, but when you do tau 4 you are not able to eliminate that, right. So tau 3 still carries on to the next level. Now we eliminate G, so what do you get at tau 5? So eliminate G, so you will have J left, right, you will have S left, and L will now get added here. Finally you will get, depending on what order you do this thing in, here I will first sum over S, I get this, then I sum over L, I get my P of J. So this is essentially the, or how you will be doing the elimination. So as and when you are doing the elimination and you are creating these new factors, so what you should be thinking of is, it is as if you are adding a new potential, it is as if you are changing the graph, right. So when I did this, right, well I did not necessarily really add anything new, D is already there, right. What about this? So now I create an edge between G and I, not a big deal, G and I already existed, right, but what about this? Now I create a potential between G and S, right. So when I come to this point, so it is like I am adding another connection between G and S, right. So likewise, anything else is happening? Anything else? J and L is already there, JSL, JSL, right. I need to have a clique. For me to have a potential JSL, I need to have a clique. So, I am essentially like I am adding a H between S and L, right. So, you can think of the way we are doing this is essentially like we are making this larger, and some of these potentials we are making larger and larger, right. So, in this case it turns out that luckily none of the intermediate steps that we are creating makes a large table, right. Nothing is larger than any of the existing tables, right. So, we could choose a bad elimination ordering. I can choose a different order. So, here the order we chose was C, D, I, H, G, S, L, okay. So, that is the order in which we eliminated the variables, started off at the right end, right, C, D, I, H, G, L, okay. Suppose I did this, okay, start off by eliminating G, right. So, I can sum over G and I have to put in all the factors that have G in it, right. So, what are the factors that have G in it? I will sum over G, I will write from this side, right. So, I will have psi L, L comma G, psi H, H, G, J, and I summed over G over all these factors. So, now I am going to create my new tau 1, right. So, I will call it tau 1 prime. So, tau 1 prime will be a function of everything in that is not eliminated, right. So, G has been eliminated. So, what it will be? So, L, H, J, I, D, ouch. Now, I created a 5-way table there by choosing to eliminate G first, right. I have created a 5-way table. So, that is a large table, right. Now, I am going to sum over this. So, I now will be summing over a table which has 2 power 5 entries, right. So, that is a bad thing, right. So, next one, what I have eliminated next? Try to eliminate I next. So, what I will do that? So, I will have tau prime of L, H, J, I, D. Is there any other factor that has I? Psi I, this. So, I will be doing right, and what will this do? It will eliminate I, right, but it will add S to the factor, right. So, my tau 2 prime will be a function of L, H, J, D, S. Now, I have another 5 factor table. In fact, this is the worst possible elimination order, okay, to give you the really bad picture, right. That is the worst possible elimination ordering. Then I eliminate S. So, what do I do in that case? Well, I add JLS also to the mix, right. I will add JLS also to the mix. I will eliminate S, right, but J and L are already there in the factor. So, in fact, this will come down. So, my tau 3 will have only L, H, J, D because I eliminated S, right. Then I will eliminate L, right, nothing new gets added. The only thing that is left out is C, right. Yeah, so by the time I come to C, yeah, so everything else will get eliminated. So, finally, I will be left with a factor that contains only D and J, and then finally I eliminate D. So, what will happen when I eliminate S? We have done till S. Okay, what happens when I eliminate L? I will end up with a factor that has H, J, D, S. Then what happens if I eliminate H? I will end up with a factor that has J, D, J, D what? L, right? No, L is already gone. I eliminate H, I will just end up with a factor that has J and D. I will have a factor that has J, D, I will also have the C's, the last 2 factors will still be there, the psi C and psi C, D, C, those 2 factors will still be there, right? Everything else will get eliminated. And then what I eliminate C, that means all those factors will get eliminated. I will be left with a factor that has only D and G, and finally eliminate D, okay. But what have I done along the way is that I have created a big clique here with 5 variables in it, right. So if you noticed as we went along, so even though this looks like a clique of 4 variables, okay, it was never created as a clique of 4 variables, right. That at best I only did a clique of 3 variables, just 2 different cliques of 3 variables, it looks like a clique of 4 variables, but we never generated that clique, right. But in this case we actually generate a clique of 5 variables, so it can become very large, right. So it turns out that the complexity can be related to this, the complexity of running inference on this graph can be related to the size of the largest clique you generate along the way, right. So these kinds of edges that we generate like this, right, are called fill in edges. Yeah.
When we are adding edge between G and S, like when we are adding that potential.
Where? This one.
G and S. Grade.
G and S, this one, yeah.
So in the process we are also eliminating I, right? So shouldn't we be removing those 2 edges connected to I?
Yeah, when you add this thing, I mean, well, I didn't want to erase everything, but when you add this fill in edge, that's essentially when you have removed that. So this is not really a clique. So this is not really a clique. This is only a the edge is the maximal clique in this case. Okay. So your question is, I don't have a potential that says G, I and S, right? So when we did the original ordering, we never did a GIS potential. That is because what you pointed out. So I was eliminated, and therefore we only have GIS was already existing, right? We had a potential corresponding to GIS in the beginning. No? Why should we have one corresponding to GIS? No, we don't need one corresponding to GIS. No, we don't need one corresponding to GIS. Yeah, so you don't need one at all in the inference also. When this fill in edge is added, that those things are not there, right. So we only have to worry about those fill in edges which actually leave you with a clique. That is what I am writing. Size of the largest clique in the elimination ordering is called the induced width of that ordering.